everybody is there watching us. A few more technical issues here again as usual, but good morning or good afternoon as it just about is, and thank you for joining us. So just the three of us today, and we're going to have a little bit of a chat really about how different travel all came about and our origins. Myself and Jill have pretty much been here since the start. So I think, Rubia, you're going to just sort of have a little chat about it and throw some questions our way, I believe.
Absolutely. So I'm going to be interviewers today. So how did it all begin? How did it all start, Sarah?
Right. Well, how did it all begin? It all began with the Boxing Day tsunami that happened out in Sri Lanka back in December 2004. So it's probably an event that most of you heard about or maybe remember where you were at the time. It's one of those huge events that I think everybody was aware of. And when this happened, at the time I was working in the travel industry, and Sri Lanka and Thailand and that area was part of the world I knew very well. And obviously we were in contact with our colleagues over there and people we knew, and people in the UK were just desperate to help. And then people over there were calling out for help. So we kind of just felt that we needed to make this happen somehow. Our sort of a few plans were hatched, and within a couple of weeks we'd set up the different travel company, with the goal being to take some people out there to volunteer and help. And the first group went out in April that year, followed by a few others that went later that year, of which Jill came along on one of them. And yeah, that's really how it all started. It wasn't pre-planned or preconceived. It just kind of was a result of what had happened on that Boxing Day.
I was just sharing some pictures there of some of the destruction and some of the initial photos from the first trip. So what was it that you did on the first trip? Was it just a cleanup operation? Or
a lot of it was a real mixture of things. We had a group of, there must have been about 24, 25 people, all different skills and backgrounds. We did have a few actual builders who came out and actually were able to help with some actual physical rebuilding of some of the sort of things, like there was a home for elderly people, there was a school, there was various things that they actually were able to help with rebuilding. Some of us were literally clearing the beach. I remember one morning that we just formed this human chain and they were still clearing debris out of the water from what had been a really popular tourist beach, and we were just passing junk from person to person out of the water to help clear the beach. We were obviously one of the very first groups to go there so soon, so it was really just getting stuck in and helping wherever we could.
I was going to say, was there a lot of people out there, or were you guys one of the first?
Absolutely, we were. There weren't many tourists because people just obviously weren't. And to be fair, it wasn't geared up to take people back in a come and enjoy cocktails on the beach type of way. It was the whole place was just devastated. The beaches were still kind of filthy, both from the sort of debris and seaweed and rocks and things like that had been washed up, as well as all the debris from the buildings that had been knocked down and everything. So they were just absolutely delighted to have us there, which was starting to help rebuild their economy as well as the country and the environment. It was actually sort of taking some revenue there, and the fact that we were staying there and eating there and drinking there, it was like really sort of appreciated, I guess, from the locals in that respect as well.
There were quite a lot of foreign charities, weren't there, Sarah, who put up temporary accommodation?
Absolutely. So the sort of international aid charities
and Holland,
and Médecins Sans Frontières and sort of international charities were sort of doing emergency relief work, I guess, out there.
Yeah.
And we were obviously very keen not to sort of hinder anything they were doing, because they were working very much on that sort of first frontline relief, as it were. But there was so much more we could do to help out sort of further down the line, which was really, really humbling, I guess, to be able to get involved with and to help out with.
So what was your background before different travel then? Were you involved in this type of work before, or was this something completely new?
So I'd always been involved in the travel industry, but nothing like this at all. The last company I'd been working for was actually a cruise line, and we were doing like expedition cruising. So we were taking small ships into places like Sri Lanka and Thailand and India, and very much exploring off the beaten track. So I'd always sort of been involved in putting trips together and planning and destinations and that side of things. But this was obviously a slightly different switch of focus to what we were setting up and doing with different travel.
And what about you, Jill? How did you get involved?
Well, yeah, Sarah mentioned I went on the second trip that Different Travel organised, and I'd never done anything like that before. the Boxing Day tsunami spurred me into thinking that I would like to do something, but with no real qualifications in what was helpful at the time. I just looked out for different things to do, and I saw that someone was raising money to go on a tsunami relief trip with different travel in my hometown of Chichester. And I came back, Googled different travel, rang up and spoke to them, and they were putting these volunteer trips together. And it was just a time in my life that was right, that I wanted to get involved with something slightly out of my comfort zone, but not on a permanent basis. And this allowed you to do it, sort of dip your toe in the water. So yeah, I went out in July with my son, who was 16, and I think there were 8 or 10 of us in the group, all with different reasons for going. And yeah, it was life-changing, absolutely life-changing. And
is that what got you hooked?
Yeah. I mean, it was the people on the trip, and it was the experience of being there in Sri Lanka, you know, getting to know the locals. And as Sarah said, it was such a humbling experience. And it was only like 6 months after the tsunami, 6 or 7 months after. And so, you know, everyone you met had a story to tell. We stayed in a locally managed owned hotel on what Sarah's mentioned as quite a tourist beach called Unawatuna. But it was like going back, well, just apart from how it had been devastated by the tsunami, it was still like going back to the 80s, really. It was quite a laid-back beach, no high-rise or anything of the sort. And a walk along the beach was just fascinating. And we got involved in projects with very local people. I remember one of the projects, the restaurant was like 100 yards off the beach, but had been absolutely devastated by the wave that came in. And the guy just had a kitchen and a decking, and all the walls had been knocked down, and we got involved in painting a mural and redecorating his whole place and just getting it back to what it was before. All very simple stuff. We got involved in local schools, and yeah, just the local people. It was amazing. I remember going back the year after, when I was then working for the company, and taking a group back there, and everyone recognised me. Where's your son? How is he? Just because we were the first Europeans out there, really, who were doing what they did, and especially my son. They hadn't seen a European teenager out there before. So, and it was just amazing. So yeah, I was absolutely hooked. So to the extent that the rest is history.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is about the people, isn't it? I think I'm just going to throw some photos here of you really get to know the people on the trips.
It's been
I think these are from some of the early days, aren't they? I'm just sharing these now.
Yeah, this has been such a common theme, I think, on a few of the trips that we've talked about in these sessions, hasn't it? It's the people, both the team that you're going with and the local communities and people we meet. It is what tends to make the trip a lot of the time.
It is absolutely amazing.
So how were things in the early days then? When you first went out there, was it what you expected?
I don't think we really knew what to expect. I mean, you see all the news reports on television, and you sort of see the photos and you read the articles, but it doesn't necessarily really prepare you for just actually seeing it firsthand, I think. So I went out in April, which would have been 4 months after the tsunami, and I guess it was still surprising how much was still. I mean, like, you know, there was still sort of like cars upside down on the side of the road and things that just hadn't yet been.
Yards off the shore up in a tree.
That's it. Yeah, so many things just hadn't been, because it wasn't a priority. It wasn't life or death, I guess. So these things had just been left, and that was sort of what we did notice then as we went on trip after trip, how things did gradually get more back to normal. But certainly at the start, it was just chaos, really, still in so many ways. But yet, it was a functioning society. They were keen to welcome us back. They had the hotel and the restaurant open for us, and the transport was running, the main roads were running. So they had actually kind of taken those initial steps to get back on their feet very quickly.
And I think that's what it is with these trips. I think over here, when you hear and you see things on the news, you don't realise the long-term impacts that such disasters can have. I mean, we saw it in Nepal with the earthquake, and we were going back how many years afterwards?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like 2 or 3 years afterwards, and there's still crumbling buildings, and people are just getting on with it. Really, I think that's what struck me the most when I was out in Nepal was just people just trying to pick up their lives and, like you say, get on with it.
Yeah. Do you remember that trip we took away from the school and we went up into the hills to a women's group? Do you remember that, Rubia? And the buildings, the houses were still, it was very, very basic little mountain community. And remember those women carrying the rocks up the hill with the band around their heads to rebuild their houses that had just crumbled. And that was how long after the earthquake? That was 2-3 years.
3 years, I think it was.
Wow.
Yeah. So how has different travel changed since then, would you say?
In some ways, huge amounts. In other ways, not too much at all. We've certainly evolved in what we do. So, as I said, this wasn't a company that was set out with some grand kind of business plan or this is what we're going to do. It just very much happened after the tsunami, and really, it's kind of carried on like that to the extent that we started talking about charities. We'd obviously been working with a lot of the local NGOs out in Sri Lanka, and that kind of led us into discussions with UK charities who either had their own projects out in places like Sri Lanka or all over the world, or who wanted to get involved. And that led us to starting to do the fundraising trips, which, as people listening and watching probably know, that's a lot of what we do now. I remember going out, I don't think it was the very first one we did, but I went out in very early days with a group from a children's hospice who had a link with a children's hospice in Zambia. And that's why they came to us, because they knew we had this sort of ability to link projects and get involved in that kind of community side of things. So we put together a trip that involved canoeing down the Zambezi, because that was the physical challenge element that they kind of needed to do for the fundraising side, combined with building a children's playground at the hospice that they were supporting out in Zambia. So that kind of really led us into the sort of charity side of things and over the last 15 years it's been now, the vast majority of the trips we've done have been charity trips. A lot of them are, as we sort of talked about, still involved in helping those local community projects overseas. But then some charities just wanted to do something that was purely a physical challenge. So we very much then also got into trek Kilimanjaro, trek the Great Wall of China, something that's more just a physical challenge as well, really as a result of demand, I guess, and being asked to look at these things.
It's certainly adapted, hasn't it, a lot from the early days. It has evolved.
It has, absolutely. And we now do quite a few school trips, which is nice. So we're sort of taking out the younger generation. Well, obviously, I know Jill already mentioned going out with her son when he was 16. I think there's something really special about sort of opening the eyes, as it were, to that younger generation, enabling them to go and experience some of these trips and countries as well, which is a nice thing to do.
I think what's nice is we've never forgotten our roots. We've maintained that objective of everything, helping the local community, and that's always remains with us.
Absolutely.
We've just grown around that really and thought of new ideas, but that's what I love.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important for each of us as well. That's something that each of us find very important, and I think that's what makes different travel that little bit more different. So what would you say makes different travel different?
Well, I think, you sort of hit the nail on the head there with most of it. It is that sort of fundamental helping that local community, whether it be through something as simple as making sure we're staying in a locally owned hotel and employing local guys and eating at local restaurants, to the more active involvement of getting stuck into a community project, which we do on a lot of our trips. I think we're sort of different as well in that everybody in the company, we all go out on these trips as well. We all sort of go out and get involved. So everyone is so passionate about it as well, and that's something we hear a lot of the time, that people sort of when they speak to us, they kind of sense that, I guess, and that sort of passion that we all hold.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think that, I mean, Rubia, you're fairly new to the company, but I think you've got a grasp quite quickly of the feeling within the company. It's everyone has a passion for it. It's very special. It's more than a job in lots of ways.
Absolutely.
It's something, and I think that comes over to the people we work with, the charities we work with as well, is the passion behind it, and how everyone genuinely feels that.
And I think we're all itching to get back out there, aren't we?
Yeah,
definitely. Absolutely.
It's been a bit of a weird year to start with the
Very
company,
strange,
but obviously, as a former participant, I've now seen both sides of the coin, and it's the passion and the belief in what we're doing. I think everyone has that strong emotional tie to the work we do, and long may it continue. Right. So what do you envision for the future of different travel, both of you?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you say, at the moment, we're just all waiting till we can go back out there and start doing all of these trips again. I mean, from my point of view, I keep in close contact with all of our partners in the destinations that we go to, and having Zoom meetings or phone calls or catches up just to sort of see how they're all doing. I mean, it's just been such a bizarre one. It's kind of similar in some ways to the tsunami and the Nepal earthquake, in the sort of devastation that it's wreaked on the tourist industry and people's economic and social livelihoods. But it's just been global. That's what's sort of so unprecedented, the fact that every country we go to has been affected, and they've all handled it in different ways. And some countries have had relatively few actual cases of the coronavirus, but yet they've still obviously shut all their borders, and the tourist industry has just been at zero. Other countries, like India is a prime example, that's still massively in the thick of it, with rises on cases day after day still at the moment. But in terms of us as a company, I think our first trips are almost in a way going to be similar to those post-tsunami and post-earthquake trips, in that we're going to be kind of going back in as early as we can and helping them to reboost their economies. All of these places that we do go and we help out at are not going to have been having their usual revenue streams coming in. They're not going to have been having the support that they normally get, and they're going to be desperately wanting us to get back out there and be able to help in whatever way we can. So we're just waiting for that day, I guess, and keeping our fingers crossed that by next year we'll be all back out there.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's going to be a different kind of building back up, isn't it? It's like you say, it's hit everyone on a global scale. Everyone's kind of in the same boat, and we're all waiting to be able to get back out there and do our part, really. So what are you looking forward to most about the future, Joe?
Well, getting out there, really. I mean, I've got a trip scheduled for March and April. I just want to see us up and running again, and as helping those, being able to get back and visit the countries that we love, and help the people in those countries, get their economy back. But are you asking me about a particular trip, or are you just asking?
No, just in general.
I want to get back to work. Hopefully that'll be next month. But get back to work, start talking to the charities I've been talking to, and hopefully a lot of the people I've been talking to historically will be back at their desks, but we don't know. It's all going to be a bit of test it out and see. Just talking with people, talking about their plans, helping them, enabling them to carry them through and get out there next year and raise a lot of money for the charities and give everyone lots of different experiences.
Absolutely. Next year's looking quite exciting, isn't it? It's just the prospect.
It looks amazing, but it depends on the restrictions.
Absolutely. Well, we just have to hope they keep working towards, sort of reducing the quarantine measures and implementing maybe testing measures, and obviously ultimately a vaccine and whatever that's going to enable, I think, everyone, the whole world, to get back to some level of normality. But in the meantime, as I know we've touched on before, we're doing a lot of work sort of operationally in terms of what the world of travel is going to look like post-COVID, and there are going to be various changes. And I mean, everything that we experience in life, isn't it? It's a learning curve, and things evolve and move on. And certainly, I think things will evolve from this. And we're talking with suppliers about sort of the regulations that are going to be in place in hotels and restaurants and vehicles and all of those kind of things, just to manage situations going forward. And I guess also in the event of anything ever happening like this in the future. So there will be changes that will enable us to all get back out there as soon as we can.
So in an ideal world with no limitations and no restrictions or anything, what would be your ultimate trip that we could offer people, like off the cuff, in the dream world?
Difficult to say, isn't it?
I mean, that's such a difficult question.
It is. I'd love to offer some trips to sort of slightly further flung, more remote destinations, but unfortunately, the problem with those is that when, especially for our charity trips, we're obviously working within a fairly tight budget and also timescales. We don't want a charity. It's not feasible for a charity to take a group off for 3 or 4 weeks to get. I mean, I'd love to go out to Papua New Guinea is somewhere on my list, but it takes you like a couple of days to get there, and then to really get into the interior and to do all the things that you'd want to do probably isn't that realistic for a UK fundraising trip. But I still like to think that in the future that some of those things are things we can evolve and develop those ideas for, because we do have a lot of people who just come and pay to go on our trips. There's a sort of volunteering holidays, and there's possibly some ideas we can develop down the line with places like that. I mean, in terms of destinations, there's a few that, I mean, Madagascar's one that always comes up there high on people's list. Central America as well, places like Costa Rica, which I know we're hoping to get a group out to next year. There's so much more of the world that we can explore.
Well, the world's all open, really.
We're offering different types of experiences as well, which we're experimenting with next year, which is proving quite popular, like the tuk-tuk adventure. So different types of things. I think that's quite a good way to go as well.
Yes, it's true.
For those that don't, because
not everyone wants to trek or build.
Yeah, that's right. But to come up with things that are really adventurous. I mean, even if they're not necessarily fundraising trips, but as you say, people are treating them as adventures.
Yeah,
and as they would a holiday. I think that's a nice angle to think about as well. Yeah. I'm certainly going on it.
That one looks so exciting. I'm so envious.
That's so good, doesn't it? I've just seen that we've had a comment from Natalie when you two were talking about that trip in Nepal, about going up to the women's centre, and Natalie's commented how that made everything very real and sort of showed her volunteers why you do the work you do. So yeah, that's just reinforcing.
It's incredibly moving.
That sense
incredibly.
It was. We were sat in a room with a lot of women talking about their experiences and how the centre had helped them, and I think it just made it so much, like Natalie says, so much more real for everyone. We weren't just there for a week. We got to know people and got to hear their stories and see what difference we and the charity were making out there, and the continual work as well. I think it did certainly bring it home to everyone.
Yeah, no, it's nice, as you say, when it feels so real and you really know that it's not just a show, but you really are making a difference. So yeah,
absolutely. So I'm just conscious of time.
Yes.
I think, are we ready to wrap up?
I think we probably should. Yes. It's been a bit of a trial today, doing this at lunchtime. So hopefully that's worked for some of you to come and join us. And we'll do the same. I think we said next week, won't we? We'll stick with this time. We'll give it a couple of weeks to see how that works for everybody. Ruby, did you just want to mention what we're going to talk about next week?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going back to another destination, a little bit closer to home. So we're doing the Freedom Trail trek. So we'll be joined by a special guest who will be joining us to talk about that next Wednesday at 12:30.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much for joining us. And if you've got any questions, as always, do pop them in the comments or feel free to message us. And we'll hopefully look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.